We're very concerned that these human rights defenders have been arrested following their very high-profile public defense of two men who've been arrested and charged for undergoing a same-sex engagement ceremony, which is perfectly lawful, which is not a criminal offense. But for defending these two men who are now currently in a prison in Malawi, the human rights defenders themselves are being harassed, and they too have been arrested, although they're out on bail. We find this very disturbing that Malawi, which is a country which has made a transition to democracy over the last 2 decades, now seems to be slipping backwards into the bad old ways during the era of the Hastings Banda dictatorship.
What do you make of Malawi's pornography charges against one of the activists?
These pornography charges relate to safer sex materials and HIV education literature, which is intended to encourage people to have safe sex to cut the spread of HIV and AIDS. It's the kind of material you would find in almost any country in the world, and there's no question at all that this material is not pornographic. It is solely concerned with educating people and saving lives. So these pornography charges are absolutely ridiculous, and we hope they'll be thrown out by the courts.
Are there any other activists being targeted for arrest currently in Malawi for assisting the gay community?
Well, unfortunately, because of the scale of homophobic hysteria that's gripped the country in the wake of the upcoming trial, most gay and even human rights defenders have gone into hiding. They are fearful of making a stand because they fear that they will be arrested. The attacks on the lesbian and gay community in Malawi go completely against Malawi's own constitution, which guarantees equal treatment and non-discrimination to all citizens. It also violates the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which Malawi has signed and pledged to uphold. So in terms of law, we're very confident that this witch hunt will have to end. I just hope that the government of Malawi, which has an honourable record of transitioning from dictatorship to democracy, will realise the mistakes that have been made and set all these men free.
Well, the executive director of the Center for the Development of People, Gift Trapens, has not yet been arrested, but he plans to hand himself in to police next Monday. Is there any evidence that the acting executive director of the center engaged in any unlawful activity? Why is the government hunting him down now, and why does he plan to turn himself in on Monday?
The Center for the Development of People is a human rights NGO which is primarily concerned with HIV and AIDS education and prevention, targeting vulnerable, marginalized communities like migrant workers, sex workers, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. It is officially registered in Malawi. There is no evidence at all that the executive director, Gift Trapens, has committed any illegal act. The organization is lawful, it's registered. He is doing good work, helping educate and prevent HIV and AIDS. But because he and his organization got lawyers for the two arrested men who are charged with homosexuality, because they have defended these men in public, because they have said that the anti-homosexual laws are contrary to Malawi's constitution, this has brought them to the attention of the authorities, and quite clearly the Malawi police and government want to silence them. And that's why Mr. Trapens is in hiding at the moment, but will eventually have to hand himself in and face the music, because he can't hide forever.
Are there any other activists being targeted for arrest currently in Malawi for assisting the gay community?
Well, unfortunately, because of the scale of homophobic hysteria that's gripped the country in the wake of the upcoming trial, most gay and even human rights defenders have gone into hiding. They are fearful of making a stand because they fear that they will be arrested. The attacks on the lesbian and gay community in Malawi go completely against Malawi's own constitution, which guarantees equal treatment and non-discrimination to all citizens. It also violates the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which Malawi has signed and pledged to uphold. So in terms of law, we're very confident that this witch hunt will have to end. I just hope that the government of Malawi, which has an honourable record of transitioning from dictatorship to democracy, will realise the mistakes that have been made and set all these men free.
How extensive is the work of the Center for the Development of People organization?
The Centre is a lawful organisation. It does a very, very important, valuable, life-saving work. So that makes it even more extraordinary that its employees and staff are being targeted in this way. It's been widely praised for its work, and now it is a victim of what looks like a sustained campaign of police harassment. The executive director is currently well away from Blantyre, the capital, where all this witch hunt is going on, but he realises that sooner or later he is going to have to face the reality that the police are hunting for him, and so we are very anxious that he could face charges when he reports to the police, but we just hope that his legal team will be able to provide him with the defence that he needs and deserves.
Well, if the organization is a legal and approved organization in Malawi, why is there a hunt for him at this point?
Well, it all relates to the incredible outpouring of public hysteria and anger, not amongst all Malawians, but by a sizable minority, over the public engagement ceremony conducted by two men on the 26th of December. They are in love. They had a public engagement ceremony in a traditional African way. They thought that they were acting perfectly lawfully, which they were. There was no crime involved. Yet the next day they were promptly arrested and charged with homosexual offences. The men, when they were taken to court, they did get some support, but they were also jeered and threatened and abused by a large crowd. Some of the papers have published quite inflammatory comments. Others have been quite fair and reasonable. Some church leaders have been extremely, bordering on hateful towards the men. So it's a very ugly atmosphere, and it's all the more extraordinary, of course, because the anti-homosexual laws under which these men are being charged, even though there's no evidence that they have committed any homosexual act, these laws were not devised by the people of Malawi. They were imposed upon Malawi during the period of colonialism by the British colonial administration. And here we are, 4 decades and more after Malawi became an independent country, and still it has retained these colonial-era anti-gay laws. So there's a big question mark about Malawi's own sovereignty and independence, and some Malawians are now saying that perhaps we should get rid of those laws that are a hangover from the colonial era.
Several governments in Africa are currently besieged with requests to outlaw homosexuality. Uganda and Rwanda are two that come to note in the press in recent weeks. Is this a growing trend?
There does seem to be right now a general move towards ever greater repression against lesbian and gay people in many African countries. Of course, South Africa is a very, very clear example of a country which is not part of this trend and which has, in fact, since the end of apartheid, introduced many progressive gay rights laws to give its gay and lesbian citizens equal rights. But in other parts of Africa, in Zimbabwe, Angola, Cameroon, Nigeria, Uganda, and of course now Malawi, there has been increasing repression of gay people in recent months and years. It seems to me that as lesbian and gay Africans become more visible and begin to assert their right to be treated equally, the governments of many African countries is responding not with dialogue, not with an informed, reasoned debate about the issue, but by ham-fisted repression. So we've seen all those arrests that took place in Cameroon, we've seen the attacks on gay clergy in Nigeria, and now, of course, we see the anti-homosexuality bill in Uganda, which threatens to introduce